It's a rivalry edition of the tip-off. Plus Gordon Hayward's improvement from last year. 3 types of team in the NBA. I'll dig into the rivalry at the end because it's ever so good. Plus, there's a little football game going on in Palo Alto this weekend. It's all next on the tip-off. Boom, 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 boom. Yes, Stanford's going to get killed by USC, but I understand BYU Utah is much more important to you. Boom, 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 boom. Cherish the rivalry. It really should be continuing, and make sure you enjoy the day. Boom, 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 which means talk a lot of trash, be just a little nasty, and make sure you get in the other guy's grill. Boom, 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 because that's what rivalries are for. How are you? Welcome to Tip Off. I want to take a second. It's a travesty that the rivalry is stopping for 2 years. It's clearly when BYU wins by 20 this year, it's so that Utah fans can play Southern Utah and Weber State and win in-state games. Just kidding. But when you cancel the rivalry, you ask for some cheap shots against you, and you just got one. That wasn't really a cheap shot. Or that wasn't really, it was a cheap shot. But it's just too bad. I don't actually get it. Honestly, I don't get it. I've heard all the arguments and all the explanations, and I don't buy it. I think it could have been done. I think there was Utah got it in their mind they didn't need to do it anymore, that they had other things to do that were more important, and they moved on. Clearly, with the scheduling problems that BYU has, they would love to play this game. And it's just a travesty. It's such an important part of our group culture, such an important part of our makeup as a sports town. It's as a Jazz play-by-play announcer, I will agree it is the single most important thing that happens every year, and it's really too bad. So I would hope it could come back. I would hope it could come back somehow over Thanksgiving weekend. To close the year, I think this year is going to be a great example to Utah of how much that rivalry game really could matter. Because I don't know what's going to happen this weekend, but I do feel they're going to probably start the year pretty poorly, and then they're just playing out the string. Whereas if you're playing out the string and improving with a rivalry game on the backside, it would be far more valuable. I will get back to the rivalry in a moment. I've got some thoughts. I'm kind of prepped it. I actually have taken. It's an important enough game that even though I'm really Jazz and NBA, I decided to take some time and prep this game and look at a bunch of things. So I will do that in a second. Yesterday, our 7th question of 20 questions to Jazz Camp. I'm running out of time. I got to get some more done. Was about Gordon Hayward's role. I love the question. I talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I found something out yesterday I didn't know that really was very exciting to me and showed Gordon's development. And Gordon's shooting from 3 to 9 feet and 10 to 15 feet jumped big time in year 1 to year 2. Which if you go back to his first year, he used to drive with those long strides, and he'd get caught near the rim, and he wouldn't be able to explode and go up, and he wouldn't be able to finish, and he'd get caught in those areas and have an awful lot of troubles. And I think that's still where a lot of his turnovers are coming from. I might dig into that and to see what's happening there. But what jumped out to me in these numbers were, one, that his shooting percentage went up, which means he suddenly was learning a very incredible skill, which is, okay, when can I get to the rim? When can I not get to the rim? When do I have to pull up? How do I create some opportunities for myself in that tough 3 to 9 feet range? And he did it on a team that had no three-point shooters. So the floor was always a bit clogged. The secondary thing was that he did most of it on baskets that were not assisted, which shows you that he's now creating for himself, or coming off a pick or off a cut, but off of cuts and assists. So really creating for himself in some capacity and learning how to play in that range. That's a very encouraging sign of development. That's what happens. I mean, that's where you could do some things in college that you can't do in the NBA, and that's the year 1 to year 2 type of development. And it was just laid out there statistically for me. I'm kind of embarrassed that I missed it up to this now. But it was there, and I thought that was a very encouraging sign for what Gordon's going to do in year 3. Gordon learns how to play a little bit better with the ball, turn the ball over a little bit less. Boom, right? It keeps going from there. So that's the next step in his development. The question was, how is he going to be used differently? I don't know the answer. Does he have the ball in his hands a bit more? Does he do some things? Probably, if he can control those turnovers and develop that. Clearly, he needs to start. He had that stretch last year where they took him out of the starting lineup, and I didn't quite always understand how that worked. But when they got him back in the starting lineup, he was playing with a chip on his shoulder, and he's clearly our first or second best player, so he needs to play and start and get those times, and I think he'll get those opportunities. He'll be playing around far better players than he was, and hopefully more willing passers than he was, which I think will only accelerate how much he's a willing passer. I thought last year at times he got to be a little less of a he felt some frustration on the fact he didn't always get the ball back. There are 3 teams in the NBA right now. This is a much longer conversation, but I'm watching this develop, and I think it's going to be very interesting. One is there's the superstar team with a limited bench. Lakers are trying to build their bench a little bit, but really Miami, the Lakers. I don't know if Oklahoma City's bench, it's pretty limited. Frankly, it's going to get less good. The Knicks are pretty close to that with Chandler, Stoudemire. When they're talking with, Tracy McGrady and Kenyon Martin this week, their bench is limited. Then there's that second-tier team, which is kind of the single star with some depth. That's Dallas with Dirk. Clippers actually have some nice depth with Chris Paul. I'm having, just off the top of my head, let's stop there. You get the concept. And then there's this third-level team, which is, I kind of feel like it's the Memphis, the Indiana, the Utah, the Denver, maybe the Golden State, we'll see, on the lower end, which is the starless team with great depth. The Jazz are really pretty good, 9 or 10 deep. Memphis is pretty darn good, 9 or 10 deep. Having Darrell Arthur come back for them is going to help them a lot. Back to Dallas is becoming more interesting the more I look at them. Everyone kind of dismisses Dallas, but you've got Dirk. If he comes back, that's a team that wins games late because he's a star. And then you've got some nice depth. They've really built with Kaman and Brand, who I don't love, but O.J. Mayo, Sean Marion, Roddy Beaubois, continue down the list, and I'm missing some guys. They've got some pretty good depth there. And then you have these teams like Indiana that really is starless but has some very good players. I would argue that we're starless but have some very good players. Memphis, starless. Zach's pretty good. Marcus Sol's pretty good. But, sorry, I got that like bug thing going on, like where a bug just landed on me, and now it feels like okay. So anyway, I think and then there's the fourth teams that just aren't very good. But there's those 4-tier teams in the NBA, and what's going to be worth watching as time goes on is can the first type of teams win. You have the star and you win. Then what's going to be interesting watching is that second and third teams, whether or not they're able to do the same thing. How far can you go one star with bench, and how far can you go with really no star and then continue on? Al Jefferson does a lot of things that a lot of people would like him to do better, myself included. We all have our issues and things. The one thing the Jazz really struggle or would seem to struggle at is playing well late in games because of the fact that they don't have a star. Dallas can go to Dirk, and that's just not something that we have in the final 5 minutes of a game. And yet, if you looked last year at field goal percentage late in games, we were about average. We were 16th in the league. We played a lot of close games, played 44 games of our 66 that were within 6 points in the final 5 minutes. We shot 41% from the field. We only shot 28% from three, which actually wasn't the worst in the league. But you wonder if you lose Al, do you suddenly go to the bottom end of that? The Lakers, with Kobe, with some of those guys in close games, played the most close games in the league last year, by the way. 46 of their games last year were decided in the final 5 minutes were within 6. But they were the number one field goal possession team. San Antonio was 2. The Bulls were 3. Atlanta was 4. Clippers were 5. Atlanta being 4, I thought was the only surprise there. From a three-point shooting standpoint, we were actually 19th. We picked, for considering how bad a shooting team we were, we picked our spots pretty well there. But that's the issue, is on those types of teams, what can you do late in games? Al's got some value to us there. You can go to the late and give the ball to Al. If you go to the final 2 minutes of a game within 4, we jump up a little bit. We're now the 12th best shooting team in the league. I was surprised Memphis was the best. Memphis played 32 games of that nature, which I think was the high in the NBA last. No, the Clippers at 36, Warriors at 35, Lakers at 32, and then Memphis at 32 were the high last year of teams that played games in the fight that were within 4 points in the final 2 minutes. So nonetheless on that, I think there's those 3 teams in the NBA I think will be interesting to watch. And what jumps out to me most, by the way, when we do a bunch of this, is how bad Dallas was last year. They were bottom half in a lot of some of these categories, and that's with Dirk. And Jason. That's not a place they usually were, and I think you will see them flip out of that and be a better team in that regard. But that's let's keep an eye on that. The 76ers with Iguodala last year were the worst late game close shooting team in the league. At 29% for the season in the final 2 minutes of games within 4 points. 29%. So Iguodala does a lot of things, but that is not going to be one of them. And it will be interesting to see Minnesota, by the way, was also one of the least good, so we'll see if they get better. Anyway, that's probably for more detail at the time. Let's go rivalry here for a second. Again, just love this day because you get it. Talk trash today. Drop little notes on guys' deaths. Send email. Do all of the things you're supposed to do in a rivalry because it's just too bad that we don't get it. Here are the 3 things that I think are really vital to this game. Greg Wrubell has done a fabulous job with some of his tweets and statistical work. I think we're out of the same ilk, and he has really done some good work on it. I will say this about BYU, and I think BYU fans may disagree with me. I'm not at all convinced I know anything about who they are right now. I think I'll know about who they are maybe after tomorrow, but because Washington State's terrible. I mean, BYU was really, really good that day, but Washington State's terrible. BYU hasn't played anyone that's pushed them or made them work or do anything. Washington State really struggled against Eastern Washington. That's turning out that is not a good football team as of right now, and I'm not sure they will be by the end of the year. I think we got really caught up in Mike Leach and some aspects of that, and I'm not sure he's really ready to do what everyone thought. I understand why we did, but now looking at the way they've played, they've just been awful. They were awful against Eastern Washington. So I don't know a lot about BYU right now, but I will say this, BYU comes in with some confidence, Utah comes in shaken, so I think who scores first and scores early in this game is very, very important, and that lays into the second part, which is turnovers. As Greg has pointed out, this whole series is based on turnovers, and frankly, Broncos based on turnovers. Greg tweeted out earlier this year, Broncos 51-6 when he doesn't lose the turnover. Doesn't have to win it. Doesn't lose the turnover margin. 51-6. So there's no question that is key to the way BYU plays, but it's also key to this rivalry. As that game was in the last 3 wins, BYU is I don't remember exactly what it was, but something like their negative 15 turnover margin in the losses. I mean, something crazy in the games to Utah. Sorry, I don't have it exactly. Greg tweeted out. I was going to try to find it, but so I think the score first then yields to the turnovers. Both Riley and John Hayes are susceptible to trying to do too much with their arm, which they're not capable of playing. So if you can play from ahead, and if you get in that 3rd and 7 and you're ahead, you just punt it away and move on and win the field position battle. Another thing Broncos fabulous at. I think that's a huge aspect to this game, is how you're going to be able to kind of control when you're taking your shots and when you're not taking your shots. With John Hayes back at the helm, I would say 2 things. One, a positive. Let's go back to it. Ron McBride was doing the show on 1280 The Zone and made the comment about Travis Wilson when he came into the game that the huddle changed. And I took that as much more of an indictment on Jordan Wynn. I hate to beat up on a guy that's injured, but I took that much more as an indictment on Jordan Wynn when I heard Ronnie Mack on the show Football Fridays from 1 to 3 on 1280 The Zone. When he talked about what that said to me is those guys aren't reacting to Jordan Wynn. You're going to see a Utah team play better. because they just play better for John Hayes. Jordan Wynn, for whatever reason, just never had the ability to lead a football team on the collegiate level, which is, it's sad, but it's true. The thing to watch with Utah, and this is where this gets very important that they score first, is their right tackle was terrible on Saturday against Utah State. Their left tackle was bad enough that they changed the offensive line. I suspect Sam Brenner's pretty good. He was probably arguably their best offensive lineman last year, even with Bergstrom and Cullen, and graded out the best at least. And he's going to left tackle. He's going to hold his own. Watch how Bronco lines up Van Noy and other guys on who's going up against that right tackle. And then watch what Brian Johnson has to do to protect that tackle. I mean, last night, Chicago's left tackle was so bad against Green Bay that they couldn't. Matt Forte is their best option, and that's Cutler's drop-off, but they had to be leaving a back in the backfield to help, or else Clay Matthews got a sack every time. Then Cutler throws a bunch of picks, and everyone's killing Cutler, and Cutler wasn't good. But part of the reason Cutler throws those picks is because of the fact that he doesn't have his drop-off that he can dump it off to in Forte or a tight end because they're in chipping on one of the pass rushers because their offensive line's so bad. Utah's right tackle, I thought, was just miserable against Utah State, and that's a huge part of this. So Utah's got to score first so they can avoid, it's 3rd and 7, and they're in protection. John Hayes tosses it out, then they're fine. If BYU gets ahead first, then that turnover game starts to go. The next one is red zone. Riley has been brilliant in the red zone. Last year he was 13 to 24 in the red zone, and 13 of those 11 completions were touchdowns. And to me, some of that's Cody Hoffman, some of these other guys, but he clearly understands what they're doing in the red zone. He gets it, and his ability to run helps him out. John Hayes was really the opposite. He got better as the year went on, but he finished 10 of 25 in the red zone. More disturbing for John Hayes is as the field got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, he got less good. Inside the 40 last year, he only completed 44% of his passes. So if I'm Bronco, I'm definitely playing that bend but don't break BYU game while trying to exploit matchups against the right tackle or see what Brenner's doing, and particularly look for BYU to do a lot of stunts early because they've changed up the offensive line, and these guys haven't worked together. And if I'm Bronco early in this game, I'm making that offensive line have to do a lot of different thinking and a lot of different pieces early in that game. Now, if BYU, the only thing I wonder a little bit is if Utah can get ahead and then, Utah's athletes, I think, as much as BYU has improved, Utah's defensive athletes are still superior, so that if Utah can get ahead, control this game, and start putting that pressure, Riley makes one of those mistakes, boom, then the avalanche starts the wrong direction. It's going to be great to watch. Again, more than anything else, just really enjoy it. It's a travesty we're not doing it for 2 years. It's a huge gaping hole in our landscape as a sports fans, and so make sure you enjoy it. But it should be a lot of fun. Keep an eye on those little things I told you, and enjoy it. And last thing, KG Poggi from Twitter. If you listen the whole way through, happy birthday, man. Happy birthday to you. Have a good one. Go Stanford. Beat USC.